My father once told me that a man's greatest wealth is not gold, not land, not cars or houses, but his children. Yet I often wondered if he truly believed those words when he decided to walk away from me, leaving me empty-handed, starved, and stripped of every ounce of security. My name is Musk, and what I'm about to tell you is not just a story of betrayal by my own blood. It's the journey of pain, survival, and the revenge life itself carved for me. Everything began after my mother's death. I was young then, barely stepping into manhood, but her absence left a hole in our family that never healed. My elder brother, unable to cope with grief, turned to alcohol and drugs. Night after night, he stumbled into the house, his clothes reeking of smoke and cheap liquor, his eyes bloodshot, his body bruised from yet another fight or fall on the road. Sometimes he would come home with his arms wrapped in dirty bandages, sometimes with a limp so bad he could barely walk, and yet he refused to change. My father, a man who once stood proud as a pillar of our home, was slowly broken down by the shame and disappointment my brother brought upon us. I still remember the nights when my father sat by the window in silence, his face hardened but his eyes wet, as if he were silently asking my mother why she had left him to handle such misery alone. As my brother sank deeper into addiction, our home became a battlefield of anger and regret. Father shouted, brother cursed, and I stood in the middle, helpless, trying to hold the pieces together. But then came the day that shattered everything. My brother returned home bloodied and drunk, having crashed his motorcycle again. His legs were broken, his arms fractured, and yet he laughed, mocking Father's tears. That was the moment something inside my father snapped. Within days, he sold off the property that rightfully belonged to both of us, me and my brother, and left the house without a backward glance. He told me coldly, "I cannot live in this hell anymore. You both destroyed my peace. Survive if you can." And with those words, he walked away, carrying not just the money but also the last fragments of my trust in him. I stood there, in an empty home, abandoned by my father, burdened by a brother who was nothing more than a shell of himself, and robbed of every resource to live. The cook, who once served us, turned his back on me too, saying my father had ordered him never to give me food again. For nights, I went to bed with nothing but water in my stomach, listening to the sound of my brother's drunken snores in the next room, and wondering how life had punished me so cruelly. Hunger is not just a physical pain. It tears at your pride, your dignity. I remember standing outside the very house I had grown up in, staring at its locked kitchen doors, my hands trembling, my eyes burning with shame, because my own blood had denied me a piece of bread. I knocked on neighbors' doors, asked for work, cleaned their gardens, carried their trash, anything to earn a single coin so I could buy myself bread. Every small job was a war, every coin a victory, but every night I returned to that empty house and cried. I was young, but grief aged me quickly. I asked myself 100 times why I was punished for my brother's sins, why I was stripped of the love and security a son deserves. But the more I asked, the more I realized something powerful. Life was testing me, molding me, and preparing me for something greater. I worked relentlessly. Days turned into months, and months into years. My hands grew calloused, my body hardened, but my soul, though scarred, burned with a quiet fire. I promised myself that one day I would rise from this pit of humiliation, that one day my father would see the son he had abandoned standing taller than him. I didn't know how or when, but I knew revenge would come. Not through anger or violence, but through my success, through the strength of my survival. Tell me, if you were in my place, what would you have done when your own father left you hungry and hopeless? Would you forgive, or would you fight for your revenge? Share your thoughts in the comments. The days of begging for survival taught me lessons. No book, no school, and no elder could ever teach. I learned that the world doesn't care about your pain. It only respects your strength. I took every job I could find. Some mornings I worked at a mechanic shop, my hands blackened with grease, my back aching as I lifted engines heavier than my own body. By noon, I carried sacks at the marketplace, sweating under the burning sun while people tossed me coins without even looking into my eyes. In the evenings, I swept floors at a small cafe, inhaling the smell of food I couldn't afford. Every night, when I returned home with a few coins in my pocket, I divided them carefully. One part for bread, one part to save, and sometimes nothing left for myself. Hunger became my constant companion, but I never let it defeat me. Meanwhile, my brother's condition worsened. He was no longer the strong young man I once looked up to. Addiction had turned him into a walking corpse. His arms trembled constantly. His legs refused to carry him, and he often lay unconscious in the hallway, covered in his own filth. At first, I tried to care for him. I cleaned his wounds, gave him water, even gave up my share of food just so he wouldn't starve. But he never thanked me, not once. Instead, he cursed me, spat in my face, and demanded more. That's when I realized some people are not meant to be saved, and if I wasted all my strength on him, I would sink into the same grave he was digging for himself. From that day, I stopped trying. I let him rot in his corner while I focused on building a future for myself. The bitterness of my father's betrayal still burned in me. Every time I saw a father walking with his son in the street, laughing, sharing food, I felt a knife twist in my chest. I remembered the day my father had sold our home, how his eyes were cold as ice when he said, "Survive if you can." Those words were carved into my soul like scars. I promised myself that one day I would show him that I could not only survive, I could rise above him. Years passed, and I grew stronger. Slowly, I saved enough to rent a small room far from that cursed house. It was nothing but 4 cracked walls and a broken bed, but to me, it was freedom. I no longer had to live in the shadow of my brother's poison or my father's betrayal. In that room, I made my plan: to work, to learn, and to rise. I knew I couldn't spend my life sweeping floors or carrying sacks. I needed skills, knowledge, something that would set me apart. So I began studying at night. By the light of a flickering candle, I read old books, practiced writing, learned basic accounting from discarded papers, and even taught myself how to repair machines. Each page, each lesson, was a weapon I was sharpening for the future. Opportunities came slowly, but I grabbed them with both hands. I moved from being a helper in a mechanic shop to repairing small engines myself. Customers began to notice my dedication, my honesty, and soon I was earning more than I had ever dreamed. But I didn't waste my money on luxuries. No, I saved every coin, every note, with one dream in mind: to rise so high that the same father who left me starving would one day bow his head in shame before me. Then came the day I heard the news. My father, the man who had abandoned me, was living in another town, enjoying the wealth he had stolen from me and my brother. But life has a way of balancing itself. His new business partners had betrayed him, just like he betrayed me. They took his money, left him in debt, and spread rumors that destroyed his reputation. I smiled when I heard this, not because I enjoyed his suffering, but because I knew karma had begun its work. But I didn't want karma alone to handle him. No, I wanted to be the final chapter of his downfall. So I worked harder, invested smarter, and slowly built my own business. What started as repairing engines turned into buying broken machines, fixing them, and selling them at a profit. My hands, once dirty with grease, now counted stacks of money. My name began to spread in the market. People respected me, not for who my father was, but for what I had built with my own sweat and blood. And every night, as I looked at my growing savings, I whispered to myself, This is my revenge. Every coin is a slap to the face of those who abandoned me. But my story was not yet over. Because one evening, as I sat in my workshop, a weak, trembling figure appeared at my door. It was my father. His once strong shoulders were bent, his hair white, his face wrinkled with regret. He looked at me with eyes that begged for mercy. He said, "Musk, I have nothing. I am sick. I am hungry. Please help me." My heart pounded in my chest. This was the man who had left me to starve, who had sold my inheritance, who had told me to survive if I could, and now, here he was, begging me for survival. Tell me where you are watching this video from. Your thoughts matter, because stories like this live in all of us. When I saw my father at my door, frail and trembling, I felt a storm raging inside me. For years, I had imagined this moment. I thought I would scream at him, slam the door in his face, or even spit out all the pain he had caused me. But instead, I stood silent. My eyes scanned his broken figure. His clothes were torn, his shoes had holes, and his voice cracked as he repeated, "Musk, please, help me." For a moment, I was that starving boy again, the boy who begged for food and was denied even a piece of bread. The memories stabbed at me like knives, sleeping on an empty stomach, hearing my father's cold words, cleaning my drugged brother's wounds while no one cared for mine. And now, fate had brought him crawling to me. I invited him inside, not out of kindness, but because revenge tastes better when it is served patiently. I wanted him to feel safe before I shattered him. I gave him food, placed a blanket over his weak shoulders, and let him rest in my house. He looked at me with tears in his eyes and whispered, "You're a better son than I ever deserved." But inside me, the fire only grew hotter. He thought I had forgiven him. He thought kindness meant weakness. No, it was part of my plan. Next day, I took him around my workshop. I showed him the machines I had repaired, the workers who now looked to me as their leader, and the money I had earned. His face burned with shame. He had left me to die, yet I had built an empire from nothing. That shame was my first weapon of revenge. I wanted him to see every success of mine as a reminder of his failure. As weeks passed, I cared for him. I gave him medicine, fed him, and even let him sleep under my roof. But I never forgot. Every night when I looked at him asleep, I whispered in my heart, "You will pay." Slowly, I started reminding him of the past, not with anger, but with calm words that cut deeper than knives. "Do you remember, Father, when you told me to survive if I could? Well, I did. Do you remember when you sold the house and left me nothing? Look around. This is my house now. And do you remember when you stopped the cook from feeding me? Now I feed you." Every word drained the color from his face. He began to cry at night, thinking I didn't hear, but I heard everything. Those tears were my revenge. Yet I knew this was not enough. Pain fades with time, and I didn't want his pain to fade. I wanted it to consume him. So I gave him a position in my workshop, not as a manager, not as a respected elder, but as a janitor. I handed him a broom and told him, "If you want to stay here, you must work." His hand shook as he swept the floors where my workers walked proudly. The same man who once commanded respect in our family was now reduced to cleaning the dirt under my command. Some workers mocked him quietly, others pitied him, but to me, it was justice. One evening, as he struggled to carry a bucket of dirty water, he collapsed. I rushed to him, not to save him, but to watch him squirm. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with desperation, and whispered, "Why are you doing this, Musk? I am your father." I bent down, looked straight into his eyes, and said, "You stopped being my father the day you abandoned me." That broke him. He wept like a child, shaking, begging for forgiveness. And yet I didn't forgive him. I let him live under the weight of guilt, regret, and shame. because forgiveness would free him, but I wanted him chained to his own sins. Years passed like this. My father grew weaker, older, and more helpless. I provided him food and shelter, but never love. He died slowly, not from illness, but from the unbearable pain of regret. And when he finally breathed his last breath, I felt no sadness. I felt justice. I had survived when he wanted me to perish. I had risen when he wanted me broken. And in the end, I had watched him die not with pride, but with shame. That was my revenge. When my father finally left this world, I stood beside his lifeless body and felt an emptiness I had never known before. Not grief, not sorrow, just emptiness. The man who had once been the source of my deepest pain was gone, and I wondered if I had truly won. For 10 years my revenge had been slow, silent, and deliberate. I had given him food but starved him of love. I had given him shelter but denied him peace. I had kept him alive only to remind him, every single day, of the cruelty he had once shown me. And when he died, he carried all that regret to the grave. That was my victory. But revenge is strange. It doesn't heal your wounds. It just makes sure the other person bleeds too. I realized that while I had punished him, I had also carried his shadow inside me for years. Every success, every moment of pride, was tied to the memory of his betrayal. My life had been built on proving him wrong, and though I had succeeded, the scars were permanent. I buried him in a simple grave. No flowers, no speeches, no family, standing around to mourn. Just me, the son he had abandoned. As I placed the soil over his coffin, I whispered, "This is the bed you made. Now, lie in it forever." That night, I walked through my workshop. The machines hummed, the workers greeted me with respect, and the lights of the city shone brightly. I had built all of this from nothing, and yet I felt the weight of my past heavier than ever. People often say revenge brings closure, but I realized something different. Revenge doesn't close the wound. It simply makes sure the one who hurt you never forgets. My father never forgot. His last years were filled with shame, and his final breath was heavy with regret. That was enough for me. I thought back to my elder brother. I had not seen him in years. His addiction had swallowed him long ago. Maybe he was alive, maybe he wasn't. I didn't care. He had chosen his poison, just like my father had chosen his cruelty. I had chosen survival, and survival, in the end, is the greatest revenge of all. I looked at my reflection in the mirror that night. White hairs now lined my head, wrinkles creased my face, and my eyes carried the weight of battles fought in silence. But I was still standing, stronger, wiser, and unbroken. This is my story, not of hate, but of endurance. Not of destruction, but of survival. My father tried to kill me with hunger, with loneliness, with abandonment. But all he did was teach me how to fight, how to rise, and how to never bow down again. And when people ask me, "Musk, if you could go back, would you forgive him instead of taking revenge?" I smile. Forgiveness is a gift, and he never earned it. My revenge was not violence. It was living, succeeding, and making him witness every moment of it. That was enough. So, to anyone listening to my story today, remember this. Life will test you. People will betray you. Even family can turn into strangers. But you must rise. You must survive. And sometimes the sweetest revenge is not in destroying your enemies, but in living so powerfully that they are destroyed by their own regret. Now I want to hear from you. Do you believe forgiveness is stronger than revenge? Or do you think my father got exactly what he deserved? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And while you're at it, tell me what time it is and from which city you're watching, because every voice matters here. This could happen to anyone. This is not just my story. It could be yours, your neighbor's, or even someone sitting quietly beside you. Think about it, and let's talk in the comments.